And we are on.
All righty, welcome to the October 3rd, 2018 meeting of the Kennebunkport Planning Board. I see that we have a quorum. We have a couple of people missing. Nina and Neil are not here. So both of you guys get to vote for this exciting meeting.
All right.
Okay, so anyway, the first step is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. I was not there, so you can all vote.
I move to
Any
approve.
questions?
No, I'm sorry. Any question? I
All
move
good?
to approve.
I second.
Okay. All in favor? In favor? Good. All righty. The agenda amounts to two items. Number one, item 180801, Jeffrey and Andrea Bove, site plan review, finding of facts. And Ed, I guess you're up to read the finding of facts.
I can do that.
Kennebunkport Planning Board findings of fact and decision. Just a moment. This is got at least one change from what I sent in, so that's interesting. Okay. I'll read it as written. Jeffrey and Andrea Bove, 405 Mills Road, Kennebunkport, Maine. Following site plan reviews pursuant to the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance held on 5 and 19 September 2018, and a public hearing held on 19 September 2018, the Kennebunkport Planning Board makes the following findings of fact and conclusions, and renders the following decisions subject to the conditions enumerated below. Finding of facts are as follows. The applicant is Jeffrey and Andrea Bove, with a mailing address of 405 Mills Road, Kennebunkport, Maine, 04046. Mr. Jeffrey Bove personally represented the applicant at the proceedings. The property has a street address of 405 Mills Road, Kennebunkport, Maine, 04046. The property is identified as map 42, block 2, lot 3 on the municipal tax assessor's maps. The property is located in the Goose Rock zone. The property is in neither the shoreland nor the resource protection zone. The applicant has demonstrated a legal interest in the property by providing a warranty deed recorded in the York County Registry of Deeds, book 12560, pages 223 to 223, this says. We're going to have to follow up on that, on March 3rd, 2003. The lot and structure are legally conforming. The property is 147 foot wide and comprises 10 acres plus or minus per data provided by the applicant. It contains a 1.5 story single-family residence with 2,219 square foot of living space according to the assessor's property card. Water on well and septic are private. In an application dated 1 August 2018, the applicant proposes to change the use of the initial 100-foot section of the existing driveway to allow that section to serve 3 dwellings. No physical changes to the property are proposed. The initial section of the existing driveway currently allows access to the applicant's property at 405 Mills Road and also to a second property along the northeast edge of the applicant's. This adjacent property is shown as Lot A on the survey included with the application. The applicant proposes to now allow access over the initial 100-foot driveway section to a third adjacent property, also located along the northeast edge of the applicant's property. This property is shown as Lot B on the survey provided with the application. Under Article 6.14.c of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance, a driveway/private road for 3 attached dwellings requires planning board approval. 12. Warranty deeds included with the application show that easements have been granted to lots A and B over the initial driveway section. 13. The applicant confirmed to the board that the existing driveway section meets the criteria required by Article 6.14.c of the Land Use Ordinance. As shown on the survey supplied with the application, the driveway is greater than or equal to 16 foot in width, centered in a survey 13-foot right-of-way. On-site review by the code enforcement officer confirmed that it is surfaced with compacted gravel, and that its drainage swales are not steeper than 3-to-1. The applicant advised the board that borings at 4-foot intervals showed that the gravel was at least 16 inches deep throughout. A letter of concern was sent to the board by an abutter, Ms. Catherine Madden, the owner of record for the undeveloped property, identified as Assessor's Map 42, Block 2, Lot 8 on Route 9, which is adjacent to the applicant's. Ms. Madden opposed any expansion of the driveway out of concern that such action would cause water runoff to negatively affect her property. Since the application asks only to reclassify use of the existing driveway and not to expand it, the board decided that Ms. Madden's property would not be affected by the proposed change. In response to the abutter's letter, the applicant provided the board with a topological map of the area, showing that the natural grade does not cause water runoff toward the Madden property. The code enforcement officer stated that he did not see any unusual drainage issues due to the existing driveway during his site visit. 16, no comments were received by the board from abutters or the public at the public meeting. The applicant has requested no submission or performance waivers from the requirements of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance. Pursuant to the requirements of Article 1010A of the Land Use Ordinance, Guidelines for Decisions, the Planning Board shall approve a site plan application unless it makes a negative ruling on one or more of the following identified findings, which would otherwise compel denial. I think, Tom, if it's all right, I'll forego reading these, only to say that all of the findings are affirmative or not applicable. It met all of the criteria. So in conclusion, Articles 1010A of the Land Use Ordinance mandates that the Planning Board would approve a site plan application unless it makes one or more identified findings that would otherwise compel denial. As noted above, the board makes no such findings. Decision. The site plan application identified above is hereby approved. Conditions of approval, if any. The applicant, pursuant to 1012E, shall notify the Planning Board prior to the transfer of rights to construct an approved project. 2, the applicant must record a copy of this decision and provide proof of such recordation in the York County Registry of Deeds before any permits may issue or before any construction activity may commence. 3, the applicant shall comply with all terms and conditions of the Town of Kennebunkport ordinances. Approved by the Planning Board.
Okay, so what?
There's only one
typo issue or something?
yeah, this
Yeah.
says,
I have the application with the book and page if you're,
oh, that would be great. So
We're
it's
looking
page
for that.
223 to, is it 224 that should be?
so this was for the original
The
deed.
original deed,
Yep.
that's right, which is the one we want. That's where the 100-foot driveway section
Correct,
is.
yep, so that's book 12560,
Correct?
page 222
Ah,
and 223.
all right, so the first one is wrong. And if someone has a pen, I'll make those changes.
Got a pen?
Thank you, sir.
Well,
All right. Four
Okay.
pens come flying. Very good.
Make it on both,
I will.
both copies.
And then I'll pass this down to you to sign. Do I need to initial that?
Yeah. Sign your line, I guess, on both and pass the pen back.
I will. I need to borrow the pen.
Okay, while we're signing, the other business was continued discussion of the telecommunications ordinance changes. We are expected, at least 3 of us are expected to be at the public hearing on Thursday, October 25th at 6 p.m.
yeah. Mhm.
It's a joint public hearing for the planning board and the Board of Selectmen. I've looked through the 4 items, and only the 4th item, the wireless telecommunications ordinance has anything to do with planning board. So,
Yeah, so just to give you a little bit more background on that piece of it, you may see some language that is discussing what has been called a recertification of this particular warrant article, and yeah, I'm going to say this all, I believe, stems back to the fact that we're dealing with an ordinance from 1999, and as we found as we were going through it, that there were a couple of sections that were missing. So, those sections had to be replicated, and because the original warrant had been created with those sections that had been missing, that's why it had to be recertified. Because it was always intended to have those there. It's just it was discovered that those particular sections were missing.
okay.
But as you can see from the exhibit, there were no modifications made to that, to any of the sections that were missing. The only other change that occurred was that the definitions that were shown for the land use ordinance are also now included in the wireless telecommunication ordinance as well. So
Right.
they are both,
They're both places.
they're both in the same document, so. And as far as the board's purpose, for the public hearing, in a grand scheme of it, your attendance at the meeting is really only for the land use ordinance amendment components, although obviously, having the entire ordinance, the standalone ordinance, having that available to you also, you understand, this kind of little-known scope of responsibility is good for you all
Yeah,
to have.
it was nice to see it, find out something we are
Now you get the whole-
conceivably responsible for.
That's right. Yep, now you get the whole thing, so.
So at the meeting, there'll be some review of the ordinance, the
They'll
proposed.
review all 4 of the items,
All right,
okay?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's true.
oh,
What happened last time was, it was an opportunity for public comment, and if there wasn't any, there was no review.
Yeah, and,
Oh, really?
and I will say that it's odd the way the timeline is set up. It's because the official public hearing for ordinances actually happens after the warrant has been set. And so there's, at that point in time, in terms of the calendar, there's no opportunity to go and make modifications or changes. But it's the statutory public hearing that's noticed and put out, so.
It's to inform the vote on the 1st of November.
That's correct, yes. And it's always been it's been the town's thought process that, because oftentimes these ordinances have been on agendas for months at a time, that, there's been plenty of public notice that there have been amendments that have been available. So certainly whenever we have a much larger scale amendment that's of greater significance, that's, we want to make sure that we have a good deal of public discussion on that.
Yeah.
But generally what we think are more of the housekeeping items tend to follow this particular route.
so, this is gonna be for Kennebunkport. So is anybody else considering the same thing, or do we need to think about aligning the hours with
No.
some other municipality?
No, I mean, it's a home, as each municipality has its own process, and the way in which they deal with, wireless telecommunications. I'll say that they probably all have a similar set of performance standards, but everyone has a different process. Some communities don't have any planning board review. It's a site plan review board, that reviews telecommunications projects. So it's a mixed bag in terms of
I
how
also think the
communities.
FCC is thinking right now about screwing around with it to the extent of not wanting the communities to even get involved with these little
Yeah.
individual bits.
That's
Yep.
that's my
So
understanding
it's
as
nice
well.
that we at least have it, we'll get it in place
Yeah, I think, I mean, ultimately, you know, I suspect in probably another 20 years, it's gonna be outside of a community scope.
Yeah, well,
You know, it's, you know, it'll be, you know, and, because we're starting to see really some of that direction anyways, is that I really think at some point it becomes considered an essential service, you
Oh,
know,
of
and
course.
will get defined as that.
yeah.
And we'll probably take it outside of the realm of, you know, of subjectivity in terms of, you know, well, we'll allow it in this zoning district, but we won't allow it in this particular zoning district.
Did everybody get their national alert today on
No,
their phone?
not if you're not if you're an AT&T customer who happens to be unluckily enough in Kennebunk, where they have very little AT&T service. The Verizons all went off in Duffy's, and then like 2 or 3 minutes later, the AT&Ts went off.
I got it on both phones. I have a Verizon and an AT&T phone.
Yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean.
Well, it's just there's no coverage. AT&T doesn't support the main drag in Kennebunk.
But my cell, the TV, Spectrum, they all did it at the same time.
Well, that's weird because the TV is supposed to do 2 minutes after.
Really?
Well, then the next time, they'll have it right.
5 years from now. So the October 25th Thursday, is that at 7?
That's at
6.
6, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's coincident with a selectmen's meeting.
Correct.
Yeah, so
Yep.
that's,
Yep.
and we need three of us there, and.
So can we talk just a little bit
Yeah,
about
we
this?
should talk
So,
about it,
Because
yeah.
what might happen is they'll ask, does the planning board concur with these changes? And I thought it would, I tried to read this, I found it not as clear as the land use ordinance. Let me
Yeah.
say it that way.
I tried to read it a couple of times, had the same impression, you know.
So the one, without, you know, going through the document, the one thing that I would find helpful is if we could maybe read and agree amongst ourselves what the definition of a wireless telecommunication facility was that is being added to the land use ordinance. Would you guys go along with me on that, or?
Wow.
I think it's reasonable, because right now we're talking about these very small apparatuses that fit on top of utility poles, but 20 years from now, it might be something entirely different.
The very last page is, you know, if we just looked at,
That's the change, the L.
to the land use
Yeah,
ordinance.
yeah,
If we-
yeah.
Of course, I didn't bring it.
I would ask, I wanted to ask myself a simple question. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 definitions here. Some of them I can understand, but I would argue that the most important one is the biggest one there, wireless telecommunications facility. So if we could understand that enough to answer this question, are the two above it, the antenna array and the small cell facility, are they wireless telecommunication facilities? And I couldn't really answer that from reading it. So let me read the definition of wireless telecommunications facility. It is a facility that transmits, receives, distributes, provides, or offers telecommunications services, radio or TV signals, or any other spectrum-based transmissions, receptions, together with the facility's associated antennas, microwave dishes, horns, cables, wires, conduits, ducts, lightning rods, electronics, and other types of equipment for the transmission, receipt, distribution, or offering of such signals. Wireless communications towers, antenna support structures, and other structures supporting said equipment, and any attachments to those structures, including guy wires and anchors, equipment buildings, generators, parking areas, utility services, driveways, and roads, and other accessory features. So what's a wireless telecommunications facility, having read that? We talked last week about it being intended to be originally the tower, but it's obviously a lot more than the tower. It's the tower and everything else that's used to do a transmission.
I think this is best understood as the use. You know, this is a definition of the use. You know, so if you have to define, you know, wireless telecommunications facility, you know, this is a description of all of the components that go along with that particular use.
So then you would say that under that understanding that a small cell facility is in fact a wireless telecommunications facility. Is a,
Well, except with the fact that it's defined separately elsewhere.
yeah, it's a subset, whatever, but it's an antenna installed on a utility pole owned by a regulatory public utility and installed within the public right-of-way. That sure sounds like the associated antennas together with the guy wires and mounting poles. And this is just a very difficult, it's muddled to me. And since it says up at the beginning that this is gonna come to the planning board if they wanna construct a new one, seems like we ought to understand it.
So I think, I mean, if you know, the small cell facility, if you're just, you know, that as it is described, you know,
Yep.
is a device that's gonna be attached to an existing utility pole. So that's a pretty clear definition in terms of what
Right.
that is,
Right.
you know.
I agree.
And, you know, when you have definitions and you have a specific, you know, which I would say that's, your small cell facility is a specific.
Yep.
You know, and then, even though, I mean, wireless telecommunications, there's a lot there, I mean, in the grand scheme of it, that's a general definition, you know, that encompasses a much larger facility.
It can. It can.
It can, is not the way I read
Yeah.
it, but if you just read this, you wouldn't know that.
Hmm.
I mean, it says up the front, this ordinance shall be known as and cited as the Wireless Telecommunications Facilities Siting Ordinance. I thought, okay, this is, so we're making changes on where we're gonna cite wireless telecommunications facilities, including small cells. I have no problem with us agreeing amongst ourselves. In fact, in general, we do this on the land use ordinance, right? We read them, we understand some history, and then we document, this is how we have understood this ordinance. We just did this with gates, for example, on Binnacle Hill. And if that's what we're gonna do here, since this is an old ordinance and one that would take considerable expense and time and effort to make crystal clear, I just think it's important that we agree amongst ourselves. If what we're saying is that in general, the wireless telecommunications facility is a large beast, and the small cell facilities are in fact small devices, or smaller devices that are sited on existing poles, then I can work with that. But this ordinance needs that level of interpretation right now.
I mean, I have a difficult time imagining, you know, with the small cell facility description that describes it as being mounted on top of a utility pole.
Yep.
And then when I look at the other definition, which is a pretty broad description,
Yeah.
you know, that encompasses a lot of items. I mean, we're
Yep.
talking guide wires, we're talking, you know, accessory
Access
structures
roads,
that go along with it, driveways to access it.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I'm too close to it, but I see a very clear distinction between
You think
the
it's
two.
easy? Okay.
I think it's easy.
If
Okay.
you climb up Ospey Mountain, you'll see that facility up there where they've got a refrigeration unit, and they've got telephone switches, they've got big microwave towers, guy lines, cement structures.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
If the technology changed and all of a sudden we needed one of those, and they were gonna put it up on the hill where the sledding hill was going to be, off of School Street, and we needed to have a really big tower there if we were going to get the next iteration of technology, then it seems like this ordinance would apply to that.
That's correct.
The structures, the driveway, the guy wires.
That's
the
right.
cement.
Except it's not in the
That's
free
right.
enterprise zone, so they couldn't do it there.
All right.
Well, who knows what it will be 20 years from now.
Well,
Yeah,
unless
and
it's
that's the-
for emergency services. And this ordinance doesn't apply then.
Correct.
Although maybe the land use ordinance does still apply. So,
Nice.
right, you couldn't put it there.
Or eminent domain of the FCC.
We'd have to get some sort of
I mean, you still have to come through the planning board or the ZBA,
All right.
square it away. So,
Yeah, I mean, we've
anyway.
had instances where we have, you know, where we have dealt with, you know, we've dealt with what I would classify as, Get into the definitions here. The temporary wireless telecommunications facilities. You know, where you have one, you know, that, you know, just, I mean, pretty blanket, just says, hey, if it's there, it's only there for a maximum of 180 days. You know, and so we've had instances where we've had temporary facilities that have been in town. I mean, they haven't been there that long. You know, they haven't been there for 180 days,
Yeah, yeah.
but they've certainly been around for a couple of weeks.
Yeah. If you had a hurricane or something and you had to bring in, FEMA had to come in and.
Yeah, I mean, you know, where we've seen it, just in particular because there's, you know, the service is relatively poor down along the Ocean Avenue, Cape Arundel area in the proximity of Walker's Point. You know, when there have been, you know, when there have been events that, you know, you've drawn along a large crowd and there's been a lot of demands for cellular service and data service. You know, we've had instances where, you know, where there have been temporary facilities have been set up to accommodate that.
So you are going to require a permit from your office to put up a small cell facility?
Correct.
And
Yep.
that'll suffice? And the only thing the planning board would get involved with is if there was either a substantial modification to existing big facility or a proposal for a new big facility?
Correct, yep. Yeah, so process-wise, I mean, we deal probably, I'm gonna say, you know, 4 or 5 times a year with modifications to existing facilities. You know, where there's either, you know, where they're either swapping out antenna, or they're, well, dealing with backup generators, or there's sublets that occur on, you know, on a couple different locations. So, you know, it's not
Right.
it's not uncommon for us
You
to
can
get.
envision, you know, at some point, an upgrade in service town-wide that added these small cell facilities at regular intervals.
Yeah.
And you would have to permit each and every one of those right
Correct.
now.
Yep.
So when I, when I read this, I wondered why there was such a list of items. And it seems like it could be an incomplete list, right? Because as I'm reading through here, I'm thinking, okay, what about battery banks, solar panels, windmills, fuel cells, and other
Yeah.
sources? I mean, is it necessary to list all of those things? Because it's, no matter, it's just gonna be incomplete, right? Can't you just say, along with support items for the facility, something like that, along with?
Yeah, but it can't be changed.
If you were writing
can't
this from
change that.
scratch, I would agree with you.
Well,
Yes,
Well,
I
I'm-
agree
I'm-
with you,
I'm
except,
gonna leave it up, that
Oh, I
piece up
see.
to the telecommunication attorneys
Oh, boy.
to say what, you
You
know,
can't
what,
change it?
what specifically
So-
needs to be within the
so- so-
definition.
This
So-
is
you
already-
can vote
this is
no.
already
at-
past the
at-
point we
at,
can modify it.
So the meeting on the
November
25th is
1st.
just to inform the public,
Correct.
Yeah.
and.
Meeting a legal requirement to hold a
And,
public
and
hearing.
and is that, are they gonna actually solicit comments from the public in that meeting?
Not
Yes.
solicit.
No?
They're gonna ask if anybody has, but
Ask.
they will not.
They will not
The way-
prompt anybody?
In general, the way a selectmen's meeting works is they have their package,
Mm-hmm.
and they flip through their package very quickly, quite often with, you know,
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, this language is set.
number one, yes.
Oh,
Yeah, the
Oh,
language is, at this point, the language is set
Yeah.
okay.
for the
So,
warrant.
but 3 of us have to be there,
Well, I was gonna be there, yeah, I'm planning.
so. And we have to actually convene and note attendance
Oh,
of
yeah?
planning board members
Ah.
at some point to, you know, wave to
Okay,
the chairman of the selectmen that,
all right.
you know,
Now-
you're there.
Again, this has been our typical practice where we do a joint meeting like this. There's absolutely nothing that says that you have to do this jointly. I mean, at the end of the day, you could hold your own separate public hearing
At the
for
next
ordinance
planning board
amendments
review.
at the next planning board meeting, as long as it's properly noticed. We do it primarily as a matter of, you know, convenience for, you know, for notification purposes, and it's a chance to bring, you know, to bring the boards together.
So-
But, you know, you could, in theory, hold a noticed public hearing, for ordinance, for an ordinance amendment at any one of your regular meetings.
Okay.
So,
So the only other item that Lisa wanted me to mention is that the second meeting in November would be scheduled for the day before Thanksgiving, so we should make sure that everyone knows we're not going to meet that day. So when we have the first meeting in November, anything we say, come to the next meeting, means December.
Right, there won't be a recorder or
not.
TV. Right.
correct.
There will not be there will not be a meeting, period. I mean, if there's some absolutely crucial thing that says we have to have a meeting, we'll figure it out, but I really assume that everybody will know it from,
Yeah, well, and at
Day
this
one.
point, where we have so much notice,
Yeah.
we've got, we have plenty of notice to tell folks that, if applications come in, that we're able to, we're able
because you
to,
told them that
prepare
in
them.
July, when we
That's
skipped a
right,
meeting
yep.
in July, I think it was.
correct, yep.
So,
I have one item to pass out, and
Oh.
I don't expect any conversation on it, but just for a further discussion, at a later meeting. So, you all may recall or have heard that the Board of Selectmen adopted a road acceptance policy.
Oh, yeah.
oh,
And so, thought it'd be good for the planning board to have a copy of that policy. At a future meeting, I'd like to talk about, if we want to make any modifications to the subdivision regulations to essentially put developers on notice that, that that the selectmen have a policy, and that maybe we should, I think at a minimum, there should be some language set up within the subdivision regs that, that puts
well, if you
folks on
state it right
notice.
here.
What does it say?
It shall be determined early in the planning board approval process
Right.
whether the road or street shall be public or private way.
Oh.
Yeah,
So this is the selectmen
that's-
directing us to do something without changing any ordinances or anything.
Wait a minute, that right
Well-
now, though, it's not, we don't consider it part of our purview.
but as part of the process, and again, because it's, your subdivision regulations are a document that just you all as a board manage. And so
Right,
this is
understood.
not, it's not an ordinance, and so, I think it's just important, as a matter of documentation, that there be some language that's consistent with this policy within the subdivision regs. Because that is a document that I can point to pretty easily, to developers, to landscape architects, to designers, that when they're looking to do a subdivision in Kennebunkport, I can point them, here's the standards, here's the
Okay,
process. And if there's, right now, we don't have any language in there that really directs them one way or the other, to make decisions early on, whether or not they want a road to be considered public or private,
Yeah.
so.
We still want to be clear, though, that the planning board approval is not sufficient for it to become
Correct.
a public street.
So in some communities, they actually have two different sets of standards. They have two different sets of performance standards for a private road not intended to ever be offered up to the public, and roads that are built to a different standard in anticipation that they may be taken over by
Yeah,
the town at some
we-
point.
We have such requirements, but everybody does them to the acceptable, right?
I mean, as a matter of process, technically, a developer could come in and say, all right, I see your road standards that you have here, but I don't want to build it to any of those, because this is never going to be a public road, and so I don't want to do this particular depth of, gravel, and I don't want to do all of these different things that are specified, and I'm going to ask a waiver for 3/4 of it. I mean, they're entitled to do that, to ask that. The board is certainly entitled to say no. We won't accept that as a waiver. But I mean, that's always, the potential is always there for somebody to, for a developer to come in and request that.
Okay.
I don't think it helps with the marketing of the lots to,
Right.
to
No.
take that kind of position, but
I'm sorry, Warner, you're saying that right now there are not different standards
I thought there
for
were.
public and public streets?
Well, There are different standards depending on what how it's classified. If it's considered, when I say private, it's your typical cul-de-sac, with just residential uses, or whether it's considered a collector, whether it's major or minor. There are standards there within the subregs that
Okay.
specify, width requirements and things like that. But solely on the basis of whether it's public or private, as far as the ownership, the future ownership is concerned.
Because right now, the selectmen certainly are of the opinion here that we're to guide the developer toward one set of regulations or another,
Well,
depending on what they are intending to do, right? That's how this is worded, the road acceptance procedure.
I think that they're certainly of the mindset that, and recognizing that the planning board is essentially first
Oh, yeah, right,
up on
Yep.
conveying this to a developer,
Right.
whenever they come in.
okay.
That this is on the horizon. And that,
Yeah.
again, based on, conversations that we've had and that we've heard, your typical cul-de-sac, that doesn't provide, that doesn't lead to a public facility, connects to another street, or is a thoroughfare, or has some other type of public benefit, would be
Right,
kind of an automatic denial for public acceptance.
right,
So,
right.
but-
And we would not require them to meet the town standards for public roads because of that.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, because you don't have a separate standard, that differentiates between, public, how it's gonna be used.
Yeah.
There are standards based on, I would say, intensity of use, is maybe the best way to think of it.
But not on classification and who's paying for it.
You got it.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
We're
mean,
gonna
we've
have a hard
got,
time putting this into the subregs since it's, among other things, recursive. They're.
well, and I'm not-
The road must meet public benefits established in section 2, and this is section 2.
We could use Java.
Right, exactly. It says the same thing twice.
yeah. So I'm not suggesting that you adopt this language verbatim in there, but I'm
all
just
right, thank you.
suggesting that, at a future meeting, we take a look at the subregs, take a look at the policy, and, have a conversation about where it might be best to, make some changes to be able to convey this policy in that document.
Just as a matter of historical practice, does the board do that type of discussion and consideration of changes to the regulations in a normally scheduled planning board meeting, or would that be a special meeting and not necessarily a public meeting?
Well, so all your
All
meetings,
meetings are public.
all your meetings are public.
They are.
You could you could decide to hold a separate workshop meeting.
But that would be public also?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yep.
all right.
But we had a workshop meeting, I don't know, just before you joined our board,
Yep.
and discussed things, and it was theoretically public. It was not.
Yeah, nobody cared, but.
Nobody cared, nobody came.
Yeah,
Other
you
than
didn't
us
have any
guys.
applications of it, there weren't any applications under review. We still, posted we posted an agenda, but it was
Okay.
it
No,
was,
that sounds good. I
It
just
wasn't
didn't want to make
attended, right.
people who had an
just
application
wasn't
wait while
attended.
we sort of
Yeah.
open-endedly considered.
yeah, I mean, we could have it at a regular meeting, and just hold it at the end.
Or have it in the middle of
Yeah, or we
in
could have,
between two
or,
other meetings,
yeah, or alternately, we could have a subgroup of 2 people, not 3. A subgroup of 2 people could go off and
Prepare a recommendation. or
prepare a
something.
Correct.
recommendation.
Yep, and bring
Oh,
it
that's a
back
good
for
idea.
discussion.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyway, I
Yep.
will entertain a motion at this moment.
So moved to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Thank you, Werner.
Mhm.
Appreciate it.
Okay.